This is the story of an old Suburban that I inherited. Though we're starting in the middle of the story, kind of like the Star Wars franchise. The difference is I'm not going to make a bunch of sequels, I'll just tell you what happened. In mid-2018, I had inherited this Suburban. The horn and the wipers did not work. The interior lights wouldn't turn off, and so they drained the battery. And the fuel pump was just decimated because after sitting for the 12 years that it did, you can imagine that the varnish had eaten every seal inside. The headliner is falling down still. I tore the back half out, and the front half is yet to come. I do appreciate the space in the back. With the third row removed, I could easily fit an air mattress back here or just a sleeping bag and sleep. The interior is quite nice, actually. The seats are in good condition. The carpet's a little dirty, but it doesn't have as many miles on it as it could. Only about 148,000 at the time of this recording. Luckily, though, 3 out of the 4 windows will roll up and down willingly. And on the driver's side, the lock and unlock features work just fine. The passenger side, you can lock the doors, but good luck getting them unlocked with the power switch. So again, back in 2018, right around the mid part of the year, I decided to get it running again. I bought a complete fuel pump replacement with the sending unit and all, and replaced the fuel pump. And voila, it ran, for a while anyway. It stopped running shortly after I replaced the fuel pump, and thinking that it could have been the distributor, which feeds a signal to the ECM, I replaced that, and all of the plug wires, and the spark plugs. I replaced the injectors entirely with new ones, but it just still wouldn't run. I replaced the fuel filter, and gave up for a while. It turns out that there had been air introduced into the system, so all I really needed to do was cycle the fuel pump a few times and open the injectors with a 9-volt battery until all of the air was purged from the system. And then it ran fantastic. And I registered it and insured it. And I drove it to work for the first time that it had been driven in 12 years, and I got a horrible popping noise. I pulled the valve cover off of the driver's side when I got home. Lo and behold, one of the push rods was bent in 2 places, and it turns out the valve was stuck. So I decided, well, why risk it, and I replaced the cam, the lifters, and I got hardened push rods. Got the valve unstuck with a bit of seafoam and a hammer. It's very close to the stock cam, so I figured it would be alright, and it has run great to this day with no computer modifications whatsoever. When I took off the intake manifold to replace the cam, the thermostat housing bolt broke, and no matter what I did, I could not get it out, so I decided, well, might as well just buy a replacement, right? So I bought an Edelbrock Performer Series for TBI. It got a factory 195-degree replacement thermostat. I figured the water pump would go out if I didn't replace it, and so I got a brand new water pump for it as well, with heavy-duty cooling. And while I was breaking in the cam, I started to hear the power steering pump go out. So that was the next thing to be replaced. I also removed the EGR valve, which sets off a check engine light, but I really don't care, because it didn't work anyway, and I'm not spending $100 on a replacement for an inferior piece of trash, basically. And from that day, it's been pretty much headache-free. It does have a K&N air filter as well, with a turned upside-down lid, although this was done way back when I was still a teenager, right before this thing was parked in the backyard. The exhaust was horrible. The muffler was just about split in half from rust. So I chopped off the muffler and the exhaust, or most of the exhaust, and I clamped on this baby. This is a Borla Pro XS with a 3-inch inlet and dual 2¼ inch outlets, which I will be integrating into an exhaust at some point in the future. I think it sounds great for a temporary fix. So let's jump into some of the things that I've done recently. First up is fixing the wipers, because that's kind of important. I had treated the windshield with some Rain-X spray, and it worked great, but it doesn't really replace wipers on something with such a steeply slanted windshield as this. All you have to do is remove 3 bolts to take off the windshield wiper motor. So I did, and I bought a replacement for around $50. They had it in stock, so I was able to get it done the same day. Now, I'll admit that I put it on wrong the first time, and thankfully the wipers were not on the vehicle whenever I tried it out. They went down instead of up. So you'll want to make sure that the little arm's facing correctly whenever you start. Now, there's a lot of spiders in this truck right now. Not very pleasant, but I'll tell you that this wonderful little can here of starting fluid will drive any spiders away and will actually kill them. I've killed quite a few black widows with this, and since I don't like to be bit by spiders, I will spray this inside for a little bit. And now that that's done, we can get on with it. This is the new motor next to the old one. We will be reusing this center nut, the plastic spacer thing, and these 3 little cushion things. First things first, we need to put the spacer on it, and then get that little arm hooked up correctly, and put the nut on it. And from there, we just have to screw in the 3 bolts that are on the firewall, and then we'll clean out the plugs on the electrical connections with some electronic cleaner, and you will want to use some dielectric grease as well, and then we'll plug it in. And as you can see, the wipers work kind of slow, but fine. I think that the module needs to be replaced that controls them. Now we're going to take off the washer fluid tank and clean it out a little bit. There's only 2 bolts holding that in. Then you must unplug the little feed line on the underside of it, and you must also disconnect the motor. I gave it a quick rinse with water just to get all the sediment out of there, and then I filled it up with some leftover Rain-X windshield washer fluid that I had laying around. And wouldn't you know it, the washer nozzles actually work. That's a plus. Next up is the horn. This is an aftermarket steering wheel installed close to 1989 by a company called Good Times. It is a real wood wheel that attaches with 6 Allen wrench bolts. So we'll take that off. The little horn wire is missing because the plastic piece inside, this little white thing, broke, and it will not hold it with a little retaining slot. So all I'm going to do is super glue that back and see if it'll work. All it needs to do is hold a little bit of spring pressure, not much, so it should work for a while. And while we're here, I might as well replace the horn relay. It's going to be underneath the radio on the underside of the dash, right here. It was a very cheap part. I don't remember how much, but it was well under $20. And I also replaced any fuses that may be related to this or the windshield wipers. So after letting this super glue sit overnight, I reassembled everything and forgot to hit record. And wouldn't you know, the horn works again. I had also taken the horns out because I thought they didn't work at all, and I needed to test them. So I needed to reinstall the horns behind the grill. All you have to do is take off the headlight bezels and then the grill. So first, with the headlight bezels, there are some Torx screws. There are 2 on the left, I believe, 1 on the right, and there is also 1 up top on the radiator support, and then you can just lower the bezels out. Next up is the grill. There is a variety of screws on the top of the grill, but do not forget there is also 1 on the bottom here, and there is also 1 on each side where the headlight bezel was. With that out of the way, I can hook the horns back up into their position, clean out and grease the connections. And I also did some spray paint tidying up before I installed them as well. And then we can just reinstall the grill and the bezels, just like that. In the future, I plan to replace the side mirrors. I will replace the 4 headlights. I'll build some custom LED taillights, since a decent man's LED taillight does not exist for this truck. We will finish tearing out the headliner, and the passenger rear window that does not roll down will need to be addressed as well. But we'll get to that with time, so we'll leave it there for now. See you later.